Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to talk about what music I've been listening to recently. I thought this would be a fun thing to do because maybe you'll discover some new artists this way. And if you guys have any new artists that you've discovered or music that's piqued your interest recently, let me know in the comments because I'm always looking to explore and find new sources of inspiration that way. All right, so let's go over what I've been listening to recently and kind of my collection of music that I keep bouncing and going back to. So I typically bounce around between the list of albums that I've added to my list. Then I have a few playlists that I've created, and then also sometimes I'll just go and browse and listen to kind of random playlists from other people or random radios. But for the most part, let's go over some of the recent artists that I've been into. So first, the Compay Segundo, I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's kind of like Cuban, Afro-Cuban music, very similar to Buena Vista Social Club, if you're familiar with them. What I really like about him is that I don't speak Spanish, so I don't know the words. But just from a purely melodic perspective, all the songs are really beautiful melodies. You can learn a lot from it, and kind of always makes me feel good when I listen to this music. So if you want, I would recommend like trying to transcribe the music and try to play it on a piano or whatever instrument you have, like especially the melodies. They're like deceptively simple. They sound very catchy and they're easy to sing. But then when you try to transcribe it, it's a very kind of counterintuitive, especially compared to kind of, I guess, more like Western pop melodies. Very interesting and lots to extract from there. He has a lot of recordings ranging from kind of old school sounding to more like modern clean. I'm typically not a fan of the like super clean recording stuff. So I found that the albums I have here on this list are a perfect combination. They have that like old school vibe to them. So this is kind of a compilation album here. It's like self-titled, which really good recordings. And then there's these 3 deluxe series, and you really can't go wrong. Like I don't think I've heard a bad song from him. So definitely check that out. Some of the albums I have on this list are stuff I've added a long time ago and I haven't listened to in a while. Most recently, up here, I've been listening to an album of only Chopin preludes by Arthur Rubinstein, who's probably one of the most famous Chopin interpreters. I've been listening to Chopin my whole life, but primarily started with the nocturnes and the waltzes, kind of the typical popular, I guess, stuff you would have heard. But I've kind of neglected the preludes for whatever reason. So recently, I kind of just focused on listening on those. And again, it's a combination. It has this very like old school recording vibe, which I like as well. The preludes are really nice. I typically like in particular like the second one here, which I recently discovered in A minor. Really worth listening to because it has this really unique, it almost sounds like it could be like a modern song. And it'd be interesting to try playing that as well. I tried playing the left hand of that, and it's this really interesting like finger exercise, which you wouldn't think when you listen to it. It sounds pretty simple, but it's almost like there's 3 voices happening, but 2 of the voices are played in the left hand, and you're kind of forced to do this awkward stretch. So yeah, it's a good like pseudo exercise if you're a piano player. What else do I have here? The Schubert string quintet I've listened to a long time ago. It was one of my favorite pieces of music in the past. I mean, it still is, but I haven't listened to it in a while. I was obsessed with this piece at one point. Like every day I would listen to it on my walk to work. Really, really, really beautiful piece of music. It's hard to describe, but he's really good at balancing the combination and the yin and yang of like tension and release. So he really takes you on a journey where like there's crescendos, it like gets really diminished and harsh, and then it kind of resolves, and then it takes you on this journey. It's very emotional, and it really rewards active listening. So you could of course have it in the background as kind of like a classical music vibe, but I think for this in particular, piece of music, I would encourage you to kind of sit down with headphones or nice speakers, close your eyes, and really listen to it and give it more than one listen, because you'll find that probably different parts of the piece will kind of hook you in. And I find that's true of most music. A lot of times, all it takes is one little hook or something to grab you in some way, and that hook kind of keeps pulling you back day after day. And then the more you listen to it, the more you start appreciating it, and then kind of grows. So yeah, Schubert, if you're not familiar, or I'm sure you're all familiar with him, but if you haven't really listened to him, definitely check out his string quintet. And also he has a bunch of string quartets, which are pretty famous, like the Death and the Maiden pieces and stuff like that. All right, moving on. Dirty Projectors is this band I discovered fairly recently. They're pretty popular, so I'm sure most of you know them. but I've only recently discovered them, and I like it because it's what hooked me is there's this really interesting melodies and arrangements, very unusual. So I typically don't listen to a lot of pop music because I find it very like vanilla. I don't want to criticize it because there's room for pop music and some of them I like a lot, but a lot of times it's very like mundane, I guess. I don't know, like there's not enough uniqueness, I guess. But these guys, I don't know if it's considered pop, but they're more like indie kind of. But they have really nice melodies and instrumentation and arrangement, like very unique stuff. I guess that's the best way to put it. So if you're looking for something to kind of that's like poppy and catchy and nice, but also unique enough to kind of pique your interest, check them out if you haven't already. I haven't been listening to them in a while, but I still have it in my list here. Flight of the Conchords. I listen to these guys from time to time. Super hilarious. If you're not familiar, they're a duo from New Zealand, like a comedy music duo. They had a TV show as well. They are really funny, but their music is actually decent, really good. And like even if they weren't comedians, the music would hold their own. But it's actually really funny, and they do kind of pseudo parodies of different genres, like David Bowie and like rap songs. Yeah, super hilarious, but actually good music as well. They have a song, I think, was it Inner City Pressure? I forget which one, but there's one that is very like synthesizer heavy. So for you synth geeks, check that out as well. Again, here we have the Schubert. Oh yeah, speaking of string quartets, if you want to get into string quartets and you're not really familiar, I would recommend the Juilliard string quartet because there's a bunch of others out there. Again, I'm more into kind of the lo-fi like recordings. So the Juilliard string quartet is really nice, and they perform really well. I'm not like a connoisseur and expert on string quartets by any means, but just as a listener, I tend to like anything that they've recorded. So I would start there if you're new. Then there's a bunch of Bach stuff. I've been obsessed with Bach for the last few months, just listening to everything I can find from him and trying to play some of his stuff. And I'll probably do a separate video just on my thoughts on Bach. Again, I'm not a scholar or anything like that, but just as a listener, like what I appreciate. It's just mind-boggling how much good pieces he's composed. Like I can't fathom somebody doing that much and that good a work. Yeah, it's truly mind-blowing. So I can't imagine anybody not having heard Bach. But if you're new to Bach or you don't really listen to classical music, I would check out, Glenn Gould is like the cliche. He's probably the best, well, arguably the best. Some people disagree, but in my opinion, the best interpreter of at least the Bach like keyboard pieces, like the Goldberg variations, the Well-Tempered Clavier. A lot of these pieces were written for harpsichord back in the day, but he performs them on like a grand piano, like a modern piano. So anyways, definitely check that out. Huge plethora of works. So he has a ton of solo cello suites, ton of solo violin pieces, full orchestras, voice chorales, pieces for keyboard, just like literally anything you can think of. He's probably written some music for that. If you want to listen to some harpsichord performances, out of the ones I've heard, the ones I like the best are by Edith Picht-Axenfeld. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but she, for whatever reason, the combination of the recording quality and the performance and the accents, I found really good on her interpretation. And it's a good contrast between Glenn Gould's Goldberg variations. Incidentally, he did two completely different like sets of the full variations, one in 1955, I believe, and the other one in 1981. And they also had different variations on the variations. So I tend to prefer the 1981 recordings, but you can probably listen to both and judge for yourself. So those are three different kind of ways of listening to the Goldberg variations, either the harpsichord of her or the kind of piano version of his. So yeah, there was a period of time where literally every single day I would listen to the full Goldberg variation album, the 1981 one from Gold. And I still to this day have not gotten sick or bored of, like most other albums, after a few listens, I have to like stop. But his 1981 Goldberg variation, for some reason, is the only album I'll probably never get sick of. I probably just jinxed it, but like literally I can listen to it nonstop all the time. I don't know, there's something about it. So if you're at all interested, I would definitely recommend listening to that at least once in your life. So yeah, I haven't listened to it in a while recently, but it's something I always pull up, and when I kind of can't think of what I want to listen to, it's always my like default album to go to. But again, he has a ton of other stuff. I would recommend if you like his style, I would recommend venturing out and listening to his interpretations of other stuff as well. So moving on, recently I've added these two albums here, the Love Forever Changes and the Neutral Milk Hotel in the Airplane Over the Sea. These are fairly popular, I guess. They're kind of like indie, but not like super mainstream, but also kind of like cult classics in a way. So if for whatever reason you haven't heard of them, I would definitely recommend checking them out. The Neutral Milk Hotel is very like lo-fi, indie kind of distortion, but like poppy folk. It's hard to describe, but definitely if you're into kind of 90s grunge, it's not even grunge. Like, anyways, if you're into that general vibe of just like pseudo punk, but like indie rock, I'm terrible at describing it. Anyways, definitely check it out because it's kind of like a classic album. The Forever Changes by Love is super nice because it's got this like Spanish feel to it, but it's not Spanish music. It's like 60s like hippie pop in a way. It's hard to describe. It's unique enough that I can't fully describe it, but it's definitely worth a listen. I don't know why I have this Ray Charles here. I mean, I like Ray Charles, but I haven't listened to it in a while. Probably remove that because it's not something I listen to too often. Oh yeah, recently I've been getting into Mozart. I've kind of go through phases of classical composers. For the longest time, when I was learning piano at the beginning, I've been obsessed with Chopin. And then only recently have I started getting obsessed with Bach. And he's kind of taken over my like obsession. And throughout the time, Schubert also took a spot there, mainly when I started getting into string quartets. So those three have been kind of like circling in my mind, but I always neglected Mozart. I never really paid attention to his stuff. I mean, I liked the stuff I was hearing, but it never really like hooked me enough. But recently I wanted to give it more of a proper listen and get into it more, specifically his piano sonatas, kind of like solo piano. He's got really nice, like pretty melodies. So the compositions don't sound as kind of complex or dark as like Bach or something like that. But it's definitely really pleasing to listen to and kind of you can learn a lot from the melodies there. And one performer, let me check her name so I make sure I don't butcher it. One interpreter I really like, I've tried to listen to a bunch of different ones until I stumbled on her, Maria Joao Pires. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Sorry if I butchered that. So yeah, I found a bunch of her albums. She probably covers all of his sonatas. And again, it's a combination of the way she interprets it and plays it, but also the recording. The quality is like not too clean and poppy and not too kind of lo-fi distorted. Just the right amount of reverb, so it's really pleasant to listen to. So again, if you're new to Mozart like me, at least in my opinion, she interprets it really well. The other sort of guilty pleasure, I guess if you call it, I've been listening is Lana Del Rey, which I'm sure you all know her. Super popular, got super famous through the video games, like a YouTube video a long time ago. And I guess I call it a guilty pleasure because it's kind of like pop stuff, which I'm not like against pop or anything. It's just typically it's not something I listen to. But her stuff is like the production and the melodies and the chord progressions. Like it's got a very like, and her voice as well. For some reason, I like it. It's like I sometimes just put it in the background and like I'm not a fan of all of the songs, but occasionally a song will come on that will like make me stop in my tracks and like pay attention. Yeah, I would recommend. I mean, I like all of her stuff, to be honest. I typically, when I'm kind of in the zone, I typically have like different parts of the day where I listen to different stuff. And like usually when I was in my programming like routine, typically I would do this after dinner at night when my brain's kind of loosening up a little bit. I would just start with her latest album and then just kind of let it play out towards the end. There's a lot of good stuff and good nuggets in there. So, I mean, she's super famous. I'm sure you've all listened to her. But if you haven't really paid attention, yeah, I would recommend listening to it and giving it a proper shot. Let's see, what else have I been listening to? In terms of my playlist, so again, sometimes I just jump and dabble in like random different genres that I don't typically listen to, but I would give it a shot from time to time. Like I started creating this hip hop playlist because I like the kind of old school 90s, like boom bop, like super groovy kind of hip hop. So this is a playlist I created of just random songs that kind of fit that general genre. So if you want to quickly look at these, you can pause the video. So again, I'm not a connoisseur of hip hop or anything like that, but I do listen to it a lot from time to time. And I also listen to kind of the modern like trap stuff. I typically go to the hip hop and just listen to this Hip Hop Central one because I don't know too many of the artists, so I don't really know who to search for. So I just kind of rely on this as giving me the kind of cue of whatever's popular in the day. And yeah, I kind of like trap in a weird way. It's like, it's almost comedy in some cases, like the ad libs that they put in and the way they echo certain like random words. And also the production of the beat is very like minimal, like deceptively minimal. You have typically your kind of big 808 and then just a little bit of like sprinkles in the background. And some of the melodies and like kind of loop hooks are pretty interesting too. Then if we go through my other playlist here, I have this Arabic playlist. I mean, it's all Amir Diab just now. I probably know the least about Arabic music, but I really love Amir Diab stuff. Again, I don't understand the language, so I don't know what he's singing about. So I typically focus on the melodies and the arrangements and the instrumentation. And his stuff, again, I'm a very like melodic person, I guess. It's just something I've realized over the years. I tend to gravitate towards nice melodies over anything else, like over lyrics, over instruments, over singing, anything like that. So I tend to gravitate towards stuff that hooks me. And his stuff, I was just listening randomly through a bunch of his songs, and every time something hooks me, I kind of add it to the playlist. So I'm not going to pretend to know how to pronounce these words, but if some of you speak Arabic, these are some of his songs. I'm still trying to build up a collection. And on that note, if there are any listeners who speak Arabic who listen to that kind of music, and if you know something that's similar to this general vibe that has kind of like nice melodies, but also has that like Doombek typical rhythms, and if you know any other artists like that, definitely let me know in the comments, because this is the thing that's the hardest for me to find because I don't even know what to search for. So I got into Amir Diab because I had some friends from Lebanon and stuff who would listen to it, and that's how I kind of got into it, and that's why I know him. But I know he's like probably the more like popular poppy guy there, but I would love to discover more like the traditional artists, or if it is anything like that. I love listening to art music from different parts of the world, but it's always hard for me to find good music from there because it's not typically something you're presented with here. So yeah, if any of you have music from your own countries, definitely share that. That's something I would love to learn more about. And if I were to return the favor, I was born in Serbia, but so I listen to a lot of music from that area, especially Macedonian music. So if you're interested in exploring different cultures and kind of unusual music, definitely it's kind of hard to find. I think I created a playlist here, sort of. Just search for like Macedonian traditional music, I guess. I'll try to come up with a better playlist I can find, but it's really interesting music because it's all has very like odd time signatures. So a lot of it is like 9/8 or 7/8 or 7/4, but it's kind of like intuitive enough. It's not like the 7/8 you would hear in like an electronic song where like the rhythm is very obviously polyrhythmic. It's more like it's danceable and you can sing it, you can have an intuition about it. And then only when you start to like dissect it, you realize that it's not actually like 4/4. So in a way, it's really clever like that. Yeah, that's about it. I mean, I have just random playlists here of stuff that I go through sometimes, like bass house I was into for a period of time at some point. But I'm not generally into electronic music. I'm not against it. I just never really, I guess because I never went clubbing. Like I don't like going out in scenes like that. And I typically don't listen to electronic music like on my own. So it's not something I got into, which is kind of weird, I guess, for a person who's into synths. Most people who are into synths are also into electronic music. I'm kind of the like opposite side of that. I'm more into the typical like rock, indie kind of stuff, but also classical music and a bunch of different genres. Oh, which reminds me, another thing I got discovered recently, which I probably should have known about before. Not the Beatles, obviously, but a specific album of theirs, if I can find it here. Yeah, the Sgt. Pepper like Super Deluxe one. if you look towards the end here, they have these alternate takes of a bunch of the different popular songs like Strawberry Fields, Penny Lane. Like the Strawberry Fields take one from this album. Definitely check this out if you're into Beatles at all, or if you're not into the Beatles. It's a very nice kind of, gives you like a lens into what it was like to kind of do like rough recordings. But their rough recordings sound amazing, as you would expect. And it's got like a different take on the song. So especially if you're familiar with the way the final song sounds like, this is kind of a nice gem that I've discovered recently. So check that out. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Hopefully you've discovered some new artists along the way, or maybe you've kind of been re-inspired to re-listen to some stuff. And again, let me know in the comments if you've recently discovered some unusual artist, or if you're from a non-Western country, or if you're not in North America and you have access to a lot of good traditional music from your country. Definitely let me know. That's something I really want to discover and explore more. Like the more authentic and folk driven, the better. I'm not typically into like the modern, like clean recording, super poppy stuff, even from other countries. So yeah, if you have more of the traditional music from wherever you are, definitely let me know, because there's so much like hidden like inspiration and knowledge from that kind of music, because we tend to be stuck in what we know in our surroundings here and whatever's popular on the radio, which could be a little washed down from time to time. So it's always nice to discover what other cultures consider like good music. So yeah, with that said, I'll see you guys in the next